Hey everybody, I'm Meg Newhouse. I'm here with 10 Pearls Health. I'll tell you a little bit about me and that in just a minute, but I just wanted to take the time to welcome you all for joining me on your lunch break today. I truly appreciate it. I'm so grateful for Matter for having us back again. I'm not sure if you were on last month when my colleague Jill was here talking about a much different topic. So we really wanted to focus in on our areas of expertise. And this is a topic that I'm super passionate about. And I'm encouraging participation. I'm seeing people come on camera. That makes me so excited. Participation, questions, comments. I do have some polls like Kay mentioned. So if you are planning on this being more of a observation lunch and learn, you may want to consider dropping because I am looking for your engagement today. This is a discussion. I really want you to leave this session with some ideas about what hybrid culture means for you and your organization and some ways to really dig in and make it beneficial for you all. So I hope that you're as excited as I am to talk about this and participate today. And maybe it's not the best thing to start by saying drop. Maybe that's not great for my ratings, but I think time is so valuable that I want this to be a good use of your time. So that's all that is. So if you have other things that are a better use of your time, I encourage you to do that. So who is this lady talking at us? I'll tell you just a minute here. Here's the agenda for today. So we have about an hour together. Like I said, it's going to be pretty interactive. So I'll pause for questions, for comments, for thoughts, for your insight and input. But we're going to cover off, just a little bit about who is presenting this today. But then we're going to dig in about this hybrid culture that we've evolved into, really starting with COVID and the pandemic and what that means for your organization now and in the future. We'll talk about the benefits, and then we're going to talk about your culture. You can share as much as you want, but it's also a time that could be reflective as well, and some tips and tricks for curating and cultivating your culture. So a little bit about me. I'm currently the Senior Vice President of Transformation and Enablement at 10 Pearls. My career has been split over the last 20 plus years between being in corporate and being parts of startups. I founded. I'm a serial entrepreneur, I guess you could say, working across a bunch of different industries. My healthcare consulting firm called Inspring Group was acquired by 10 Pearls in March of 2023. And so in my new role, I'm expanding the reach of this end-to-end digital transformation firm, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a second. But as my background probably relates to the topic today, I wanted to share with you the times that I tried unsuccessfully to create a hybrid culture in the past. So I was working in more of a corporate environment when I had my kids in the late 2000s. So after each kid in 2007 and 2009, I proposed a hybrid work environment. Now, this wasn't something, of course, that was going on at the time. I was in the office every day, 9 to 5 at my desk. My job at the time was an instructional designer. So I was designing and developing training and learning programs in the technology department. So anytime any sort of new technology was rolled out, I'd create the end user learning materials and classes for that. So a lot of my job was writing. And as a knowledge worker, which I imagine a lot of you are, I was on the computer a lot of times. I was, really focused heads down. But working in an environment, and especially in the corner cube that I sat in, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm kind of a social person. People would stop by and want to chat. So a lot of my day was given away to talking with my colleagues. And look, I'm not going to say that is a bad thing. We will talk about that need for building relationships and how we can do that in the hybrid environment. But my proposal was if I could be home, I just proposed one day a week, y'all. During this time when I was having kids as a new parent, not only would I be more focused in the work that I was doing when I had to be heads down writing, but it would also garner me the flexibility that I needed as a new parent to kind of settle into this new normal for me. I was refused both times, shockingly. And guess what? I left the company shortly after that because it wasn't meeting the needs that I had. So just some food for thought I wanted to share with you. How that's evolved is in 2017, we started the company Inspring Group, the consulting firm that was acquired by 10 Pearls in 23. And we started it as a remote first company. It was remote first before remote first was cool, I like to say. And this was because we were hiring experienced, what we called unconsultants, folks that we trusted to do the job that we hired them to do wherever and whenever they needed to do the job. That's what we hired them to do. So during the time there, just a little bit of the chops when I was CEO, We were named a best remote first company in the US 3 years in a row. I'm looking at my notes because I want to get it right. By Built In. We were one of 22 startups to watch in 2022, also by Built In. We were Great Place to Work certified, and we won the prestigious honor of being an Inc. Best Workplace. What was proudest for me, though, was our 100% eNPS score each quarter that we receive from our team. So that's an employee net promoter score. Just some simple questions that are asked every single quarter to see how people were doing, and 100% satisfaction every time. So there's my background. There's my thoughts a little bit on hybrid work culture. Just a little bit about 10 Pearls and 10 Pearls Health. So the reason that we wanted to partner with 10 Pearls and become part of their ecosystem is that they're a global organization that was founded in 2004, and they offer end-to-end digital transformation services. So everything from AI, data, cybersecurity, consulting, testing, QA, really you name it, we do it. And what we loved about them is the culture fit that we had. So the culture that we created in Sprint Group fit in perfectly with the culture at 10 Pearls. And we are proud over the last year how we've come together and grown together. So if you have any questions about what we do, I'd like to talk to you more about that. But today we're focused on really creating this hybrid work culture and making it work for you. So we're going to start with our first poll, and we're going to use Slido. So there's two ways that you can connect, and I'm going to move over to that in just a second. But the first question I'd like to hear from you all is what your biggest concern is with hybrid work. So let me come and launch the Slido, ignore my screen. And you can join there. You can scan that QR code, or you can go to slido.com and you can type in that number there. So I'll just give you a second to do that. All right. I'm going to assume you're all connected. Raise your hand or give a note if you aren't. But let's go ahead and launch this now. So you should be seeing on your Slido, what is your biggest concern with hybrid work? Resolving miscommunications, yes. That can be hard. Collaboration. The 5 folks typing. Cultural integrity. I love that. Details are correct.
Hi all, a few folks just joined us. They might still be
Okay.
connecting to audio, but this is our first poll, so go ahead and scan the QR code, or you can just give it a moment as you settle in.
We'll have a couple more, or you can throw it in the chat, or you can come off mute. I don't need to be the only voice I hear today. Camaraderie, yep, that comes into, I think, the cultural integrity. I love that. Not having everybody in the office for impromptu creativity, yes, right? Like bumping into each other. I know I was making that joke about being the social butterfly in my corner queue, but there was something to running into folks at the office, right? People not speaking up enough. These are great. These are really good concerns. So good. We'll just give another minute here. And if you're typing it in here, if there's any you want to clarify or you want to double down on, feel free to come off mute and share it with me, because I don't want to put you on the spot, but there are some really good things here that if you'd like to expand upon it, I encourage you to do so during this time. Okay, so if I had to summarize, it sounds like some misinterpretations, miscommunications that can happen virtually, right? So, if you're not in the room with someone, it is sometimes hard to read their body language. Even though tools such as Zoom and Teams, where you can see faces, helps, it's really easy to misinterpret tone over email, IM, chat, etc., which is an issue we've always had, even when we were in the office together. But it can be even more compounded when we aren't regularly in the office together, right? Kind of that missing that like impromptu bump into each other. You might quickly solve a problem. I get that so much. We can solve for that in hybrid. I'll tell you a little bit about that. Productivity is an interesting one. This comes up so much. So we can talk a little bit more about that as well, or if you want to come up and talk about that. But I think folks are worried about people being productive. And so we're going to talk about, how to build a culture where that's not necessarily something that you need to worry about. Okay. This is great. Any that I missed that you wanted to expand upon before we move to the next part? Cool. Thank you guys for your participation. I know there's not a lot of us on here. We got a lot of feedback here, and these are really valid concerns. Absolutely. So we'll go back over to my deck here. All right, so I heard all of your concerns, and we do have to balance that with the fact that it would appear, in my humble opinion, that hybrid work is here to stay. So I have some stats for you around that. And I have all of these articles that I'm going to discuss. Kay, if that's something we want to include in what you send after the presentation, I'm happy. Or if folks want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to share. One or both of those ways works for me. So just to share with you this first one here. So according to a study by Forbes, a staggering 98% of workers express the desire to work remotely at least part of the time. This overwhelming figure reflects the workforce's growing affinity towards the flexibility, autonomy, and work-life balance that hybrid work offers. You're going to hear me use that word autonomy quite a bit. We might need to define it here. I haven't planned to do that, but we'll get to that in just a minute. There's a Gallup study that in 2019, so pre-pandemic, right, 60% of remote capable employees spent their week working fully on site. So remote capable employees are folks like me, knowledge workers that I don't need to be in person to do my job, right? I'm not a doctor saving lives. I'm not a FedEx worker delivering packages. I'm not greeting people at Walmart, or, there's certain jobs that are remote capable. I like this term. So in 2019, 60% of remote capable employees spent their week working fully on site, even though they were remote capable. That was me trying to get that one day a week to myself, right? Whereas the figure has fallen to just 20% in 2023. So from 60% in 19 to 20% in 23. In contrast, only 8% worked exclusively remotely in 2019, compared with 29% of remote capable employees who were fully remote in 2023. So that jumped 21% after COVID. At the same time, hybrid work has increased significantly en route to becoming the most prevalent work arrangement in most offices. This means that approximately 40% of remote capable employees have shifted from working entirely on site to either a hybrid or exclusively remote work arrangement. As a result, these unprecedented shifts in remote work flexibility have reshaped the workplace for remote capable employees, with a dominant pattern being hybrid. Again, this is according to Gallup. This was 2023. I have a more recent article here from CNBC from this past June of 24. It's quoting a study from Nick Bloom from Stanford. He's part of Stanford's Institute for Economic Policy Research. And if you haven't heard of him, he's a highly regarded expert on work modes who's been researching remote productivity since well before the pandemic. So like this guy picked the right career to choose before the pandemic, because like now he's researching all of the different work modes. So the study that he did involved over 1,600 employees at a company called Trip.com, which is a multinational Chinese technology firm. And it took place across 6 months to analyze job retention, satisfaction, productivity, and development. The study used a 2-day at-home work week as their hybrid model because it was a primary structure for 70% of global employees overall working on a hybrid schedule. So think about that. 70% of global employees overall are coming into work are coming to work 3 days a week. They're home 2 days a week. Prior to this study, Trip.com had no hybrid policy in place. So when they began the 6-month experiment in 2021, they didn't have this policy in place. The study included 395 managers and 1,217 non-managers, and it found that non-manager attrition for those hybrid employees had a 2.4% rate, which was a 1/3 reduction from the control group of 7.2%. So I thought all this data was super interesting and fairly recent and relevant. What are your initial thoughts on this data, these studies about hybrid work? You can come off mute or you can throw it in the chat. Do we have any chats yet? I can't see. I have so many screens, but none of them has your chat on it. Okay,
No,
is
I
any,
haven't seen
anything?
anything come in
No,
either.
it's fine. That's okay. I won't force you to participate, but just some food for thought, right? Just reflect on these. So this is just underscoring that work has changed, right? I once heard it was the CEO of Airbnb, Brian, I can't pronounce his last name, but he begins with a C. He was talking about like kind of forcing return to office, or this whole return to office movement that was happening in early 21 or mid 21. He called it anachronistic, and I had to look that word up. And it means from another time. So it made me pause and think, change is hard. As humans, we really don't like it. We like things to kind of stay the way they are. Status quo feels good. But we, as organizations, as leaders in organizations, as individuals who I imagine are thoughtful about their culture, or otherwise you wouldn't have stayed on the call with me today, we do need to embrace the change that's happening. So as we're seeing from the last 4 years, it would appear that this hybrid work environment seems to work the best for most people. So I have another poll. We're going to start to shift our mindset just a little bit. And just give me a second. I'm going to stop sharing because I need to launch this poll here. Here we go. Next poll. You should be seeing it now, but if not, I'll share my screen again. The question is, what are the benefits of hybrid work? This is a leading question. Am I leading the audience? Okay, I see 3 of you typing now. So our first question, for those of you who joined us a little bit late, was what are some of your top concerns of hybrid work? And they were so good, really great. Miscommunication, misunderstanding, losing that kind of in-person creativity and innovation that might happen when you just kind of bump into someone in the office, concerns about decreased productivity. PJs, that was the first one I saw. Work. I know. You're kind of like the Zoom mullet. What do I got going on down here? I can't tell you. Cool. Oh, happy Energized people. Cool. And I encourage, as those that may have just joined us, if you'd like to come off mute, please, I encourage you to do so. If you'd like to jump in and kind of double down on any of your answers, I encourage you to do that. Work-life balance, work-life balance, work-life balance. Commuting, gosh, that's such a huge one. In some of the research I was doing, I read that some Americans, on average are commuting over an hour a day, sometimes 90 minutes a day. Some of you might relate to that. Yeah, no commute cost too. There is a cost associated with going into an office, isn't there? You think about, not only, perhaps the parking at the train and then the train ticket, maybe you had to take like a bus that wasn't included to your office, and then maybe you're having lunch or coffee, that all starts to add up, doesn't it? Cool. Okay, good. We'll stop. Oh, we
In
got
the
two more.
chat box, I'm just going to jump in. We
Yeah,
had
yeah,
someone comment, we can do more with their time and not waste time getting dressed and driving.
yeah, right? Yes. Time is so different. I had the great fortune of partnering with organizations, pre and post pandemic, but especially during the pandemic. And some of the organizations that we worked with asked us to come in and lead workshops somewhat like this. A lot of it was around leading remote teams. How do you do this? Oh my gosh, this was new to so many people. And those were really fascinating conversations. And through some of these conversations, we were talking about, obviously we were like in the throes of this pandemic and how we were all navigating that and dealing with that. But, we did try to silver lining it, which isn't always the right thing to do. But we're like, what are some of the benefits? And it was a lot of these folks, some folks were seeing their family more than they ever had. They were, home on time for dinner, which they never were. They were prioritizing their health by having the time instead of commuting to actually exercise or take the time to prepare healthy meals. So, there are benefits. We cannot deny that there are some benefits. Oh, and here the anonymous at the top here has kind of a juxtaposition to the concerns, which is there's less hallway talk and office drop-ins, whereas the other was those more, you had more innovation and collaboration, and both are right. Both are right. You can have both. You can have those random bump ins where you're like, oh my gosh, wow, I just learned something new from this person I never expected to. Or hey, this conversation never would have happened had I been not in the office today, right? But then you also do have, as I was, bemoaning about earlier in the conversation, where I sat in that corner cube, people like to come by a lot and they knew I was chatty and friendly. And so a lot of my time in my day was spent talking with my colleagues versus actually getting productive work done. So I was definitely less productive on the days I was in the office for sure. Cool. Okay. And I see some more productive. Yeah, isn't that so funny? We can have different opinions, and it doesn't mean that anyone's right or wrong. It's just the way that we're approaching it and viewing it. So this is great. Thank you all so much. Let me come back to my presentation then here. Cool. Any other additional thoughts or comments you'd all like to add? So we've talked about our concerns, we've talked about our benefits. Well, let's get that data. I'm a very data driven person. I imagine most of you are as well. So some of the benefits were mentioned by you brilliant folks, and I just wanted to elaborate on those a little bit. So I'm, about 5 bullets down is the less turnover one. That's that reduction in attrition. That was that study I just referenced, and that's just one example. But the study that I just referenced about that Trip.com organization. So in the Gallup study that I referenced earlier when we were talking about that hybrid work is here to stay, they discuss in that article leaning into the advantages of hybrid work. And I should note that for Gallup, and I'm sure most of you have heard of Gallup, amid the start of the pandemic in 2020, Gallup increased the frequency of their US employee polling to closely track a wide array of historic changes to the American workplace that we were just talking about. Since then, they have surveyed more than 200,000 employees in total, and they continue to survey approximately 18,000 employees every 3 months as part of their ongoing commitment to the study of how people work and thrive. So for those of you who are data geeks like me, this is a really big group of people that they're polling regularly to get their data. Okay, so hybrid employees consistently report that the greatest advantage of hybrid work, the greatest advantages tend to be what you all said: better work-life balance, more efficient use of time, less burnout at work, and more autonomy. There's that word again, autonomy. Separately, their in-depth data analysis and consulting experience further validate these benefits and also demonstrate that hybrid workers have significantly higher employee engagement, better overall well-being, and lower turnover and tensions than their fully on-site coworkers who are also remote capable, right? There are folks that need to be on site and they know it and they know they can't do their job remotely, but those that, like I said at the beginning, I knew a lot of my work could be done remotely and I just didn't understand why I had to sit at that desk from 9 to 5 every day. Employers tend to agree with these benefits for their employees, and they also add that their organization benefits from less turnover, a better employee value proposition, and a larger talent pool. In their experience, job openings may receive as many as 2 to 3 times more applicants for certain jobs that allow hybrid or remote options. Any thoughts here? Are you seeing these in your organization? Were your comments about the benefits for you specifically or for you and your organization? Again, feel free to come off mute or put it in the chat. Not today. Not today, Meg. Not today. That's okay. Just some food for thought again, right? So we're talking about hybrid work being here to stay, and we're talking about those benefits. So think about that with your employees. So for those concerns that you have, we can think about how we might be able to counteract those with these different benefits. So if you typed a concern on that first poll, think about how these benefits might help to alleviate that. These either perceived or actual benefits from your employees, whether it's, perceived or actual, it means something to them. And it's something to consider. We're going to talk about that as we move into the culture discussion. Anything in the chat, Kay, before I move on?
They just said the more efficient use of time benefits everyone, and because I mentioned the hallway chatter.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, and just a note to that efficient use of time, right? That makes me think of that autonomy, that word autonomy, right? And people, so I'm sure you know what it is, but let me just tell you how I think about it. It's that ability to do what you want to do when you want to do it. And as grown-ups, this is something not only that we've earned, but really, when you think about engaged employees and employees who are excited to show up every day and really give their best, who um, want to be like brand ambassadors for their organizations, right? Who are like the ideal employee, who are not the ones who are like, not my job. The difference between engaged and disengaged employees, I heard this analogy recently, is you want everyone on the team rowing in the same direction, right? So the engaged employees are like the ones in the back, like pulling as hard as possible and cheering the team on. And the disengaged employees are the ones with like a tool, like poking holes in the boat as you're going along. And that makes a really big difference. And I'm sure you can think of folks that you've seen either on your team or in your organization that fall into one or the other of those buckets. And you really want to create an environment where you have those engaged employees showing up. And autonomy is a huge part of that, allowing folks to determine when, where, and how they work. And we'll talk about, how you get the right folks in order to be able to do that and feel comfortable doing that. So you're not worried about people getting their work done. All right. Got another poll, poll 3 of 4 today. This is our last one on Slido. This is the last one where I'm kind of jumping back and forth. I appreciate your patience here. So let me launch this next one. Here we go. Hopefully you all are seeing that one. What is one word you would use to define your work culture? Usually it's the first word that pops to mind. And remember, they're all anonymous, so I don't know who works where. So if it's not that positive, that's okay. Evolving. Oh, cool. Oh, enjoyable. Yay. This is the Millennium Heart, by the way. There's like a Gen Z. It's a Gen Z heart. I don't know if you guys have seen that. I'm a Zennial. I don't know if you guys have heard of Zennials. I'm on the cusp of Gen X and Millennial. We're our own micro generation. Let me know if you'd like to talk more about that. Ooh, toxic, since you left, you were holding it all together. If you want to talk offline about that, I would be happy to discuss that. I get that. Supportive, cool. I like these positive. Yes, it's great. And these are anonymous, so remember, nobody's knowing. Collaborative, nice. Wow, so cool. These are not typically the ones I see. Let me just tell you that. This warms my little heart as a culture fanatic. This warms my little heart. This is great. Cool. All right, we got one or two more. So great. Awesome. Well, congratulations. If this is how you're really feeling about your culture, minus the toxic, busy. Yeah, yeah. Evolving, I love. Right? That's very positive. We're always evolving, aren't we? If we aren't evolving, we're doing the opposite. Cool. All right. Thank you all so much for that. I appreciate your participation. So let's talk about culture. One of my personal passions, honestly. I feel so fortunate to have been a part of some really great cultures, and I've had the pleasure of building one at the company that we sold a year ago. This is my favorite way to define culture. Um, if you're familiar with Simon Sinek, he is an author, very positive guy, one of my favorite thought leaders out there. He wrote Start With Why, and this quote is from his book Leaders Eat Last. He wrote it and he studied the US military and specifically the Marines, and how they treated their people. And it's really fascinating. And so this, Lieutenant General George Flynn became actually a close friend and mentor of Simon's during this process. And this just makes so much sense to me. Culture equals values plus behavior. Does this resonate with you all? Give me a hand raise if you agree, or feel free to throw in the chat or come off mute if you want to challenge or have any questions on it. So thinking,
Got 3 thumbs up from that.
cool. Okay. Yeah, thinking about your culture. So you have to start by defining your values. And when I talk about culture, let me take a step back here. So I spent time in corporate, as I said, and in startups, and I've had the benefit of being part of positive and not so positive, evolving cultures in there. And I like to think about macro and micro culture. So if you're part of a large organization, there's this macro culture. Like I think about, I worked for the largest law firm in the world, and you would walk into one of their offices, and it was like, whoa, and like you could immediately feel like excellence, um, competency, elegance, right? Like just by walking in and just like and like talking with the person greeting you. I mean, that all of that was kind of that culture. Now, this was, an organization of 5,000 plus employees, including the attorneys and the non-attorneys. And I like to think that each of those teams within there had their own microculture they were responsible for. Now, that microculture has to exist within the macro culture, right? They have to understand how they're feeding into the goals and the end results of the overall organization. But those individual teams have their own microcultures, don't they? How they show up for each other, the norms within their groups, how they communicate, that kind of thing. But that all starts with the leader. It starts with the person at the top. So the macro culture starts with the CEO or the C-suite team, and it works its way down. And then those microcultures ideally fit in within that macro culture. But then those leaders, those managers, those directors, those senior managers, whoever's leading that team, they're responsible for the culture of the folks that report directly up to them. So just think about that, because if you're leading a team, I used to tell this to the managers I was training, like you could be the difference between people wanting to show up to their job and dreading showing up to their job, right? Because of your microculture. Even if the company was awesome and they loved working there, the microculture you're creating on your team, whatever that is, you need to be hyper aware of that and what that means. And so it starts with having these values. Now, your organization may have clearly defined values. Whenever I ask people what their company's values are, they can usually name one, maybe. So think about that. If you're at a startup and you're creating these, or you have some, really pay attention to how many that you have. Like people aren't going to remember 17 values. Um, You'll be lucky if they remember 5. I think 3 is a great number, but it's just something to think about. So you start with your values, and then honestly, you should document the behaviors that are expected around those values. What are those associated behaviors that support the values of your culture, whether it's your macro or micro? So I think I'm talking about startups and corporate folks here. So just think about that. All of you can do this. You can do it for your own team that you manage. You can do it for your entire organization. You could do it for the company that you're a part of. And then when you have these values and behaviors identified, talk about them regularly, and what they mean in action. Reward them when you see people living your values, and then coach them when they're not being met. When people aren't living your values, what does that look like? And these values are like the basis for everything that you're doing. Like this is just the foundation, right? So it doesn't matter that we're talking about a hybrid work environment here. We could be talking about, making purchases. We could be talking about partnering with organizations. We could be talking about doing charity work. Do they fit within these guide rails, these values and behaviors that we've identified for our organization? And if so, then great. And if not, then we should probably talk about it and determine if it's really the right thing for us to be doing. So I'm going to give you an example here. This is from the organization that I co-founded prior to being a part of 10 Pearls. It was called Inspirin Group, local Chicago company. We were founded in 2017, as I mentioned earlier, remote first before it was cool. And really, we're a bunch of what we call recovering consultants, experienced consultants from some of the big four, some of the more well-known consulting organizations. And we founded this organization to disrupt traditional management consulting. We wanted to do it differently. And it really was around the people, the way that we interacted and worked with our team as well as with our clients. And so it was awesome. In a word, it was awesome. It was the experiment worked. And here were our core values. As I said, 3, those are my favorite, but we said have integrity, care about the greater good, and get it done. And then these were the associated behaviors that's what that meant. And these were just a couple of them. We actually had more, but these were the ones. This was in our new hire orientation. This was a part of every quarterly all hands meeting that we had. And we brought it up really whenever we felt was necessary. We had a weekly newsletter that we called out people who were living our values. Folks were able to nominate others who were living our values. And then at the end of the year, we had a Living Our Value award, and folks would get like an actual plaque with their name on it and which of these values that they won, and they run a monetary award for that. Um, we had weekly team meetings where we brought these up, and we had individuals talk about them. So it really was woven into everything. And I have to tell you, as CEO, when I was making some tough decisions, I would always run it through these filters. You know, are these decisions I'm making, do we have integrity while we're doing this? Does it care about the greater good? And are we getting what we need to get done? And it's just so helpful. I just thought it made it easy. It just makes my job so much easier. If I can run everything through these filters, then it makes my decision making that much easier. I'm going to pause for questions or comments here. Okay, so sometimes easier said than done. So what are some tips and tricks for curating and cultivating your culture? Um, it all starts with the hiring, y'all. If you're hiring right, you don't need to worry about where or when people are working. Hire people that you trust to do the work you hired them to do. And as my college professor would say, let them have an A plus until they prove you otherwise, right? Did you guys have any college professors that did that like day one of class? They're like, you'll have an A plus today. It's like, great. It's up to you to keep it. I do think about that with hiring folks. Like, you know, I know hiring can be difficult. It's always so easy. We were very fortunate when we were building our team. A lot of times we were able to hire folks that we had worked with before. So we knew them and we knew how they worked and their work product. But as we grew, we were unable to do that. We had to hire folks that we didn't know. And so, you know, you talk to them a couple of times and you bring them onto your team and hope that it works out for the best. A lot of times it does. If it doesn't, you have to acknowledge that as well, and probably cut ties sooner versus later. But when you have that relationship and you've hired someone that you trust to do the job that they do, let them do that. It doesn't matter where they're doing it from, you know, and you can tell really in the results pretty quickly if people are doing their job, right? If they're being productive, if they're getting done what they need to get done. And it really shouldn't matter where they're doing it or when they're doing it. I have someone that gets up and likes to work between 8 and 1, and then they're off when their kids are home from school, and they like to take the time and spend with their kids. And they're back on again around like 7 to 10 or something, or whatever that is, you know. But I'm never worried. They always get their work done. The client is so happy. Everything is taken care of. And so I don't need to worry about it. It doesn't matter to me when she's getting her work done, you know, and it works so well for her life. So just things to consider. Another article that I want to share with you, an HBR, Harvard Business Review article. This is from 2021. But according to HBR, employees want flexibility in their work by way of that magic word, autonomy. So you can provide this flexibility and autonomy through these things, principles and not policies. So mandates are yuck. Like, people don't want to be told what to do. If you have some principles, guiding principles, whether they're your values or if you establish some principles around your hybrid work arrangement, maybe how many days folks are in the office, what days folks are in the office. I can't tell you how frustrating it is for folks to go into the office just to get on Zoom calls all day, you know? So if you're going to come in and you want that creativity and that collaboration and that innovation that happens when people are in together, you know, really be intentional about who is coming in when and why. Are there things they're doing in person together that can't be done remotely, or that'll be more successful if done in person? And look, again, as I said at the beginning, I'm a very social person. I am an extrovert. When we were locked down in our homes, my energy level was sapped. I was like moping around, making my family hug me all day because I was like, I miss the human interaction. I would tell them I need to recharge my batteries and like ask for a hug. I know the introverts, my husband, were just like, this is the best. I'm locked in this room with my favorite people. I don't have to talk to strangers. Yay. Um, so I, for one, know the value of getting together in person and the benefits of building those relationships. But the word I'm going to use over and over again is being intentional. You can build successful relationships remotely. You really can. I have over these past 4 years. But that takes intention, that takes connecting intentionally, that takes preparing for these conversations, that takes being focused and not multitasking while you're having these conversations, right? Being really intentional and building these relationships is super important. And you can do that both in person and virtually. So just thinking about giving the people the autonomy that they need to choose when they want to come to the office, and give them some principles. We'd like you in 2 days a week, and your team's going to be in on these days. We'd like you to join us on those days, or whatever you think works the best for your organization. I love this next one that HBR talks about. They talk about investing in competence and relatedness. So to them, competence is skill building. People want to have a mastery of skills. In order to do that, you can provide some professional development for them. And this is super important for employee engagement, for keeping those employees on your team, right? Especially in a hybrid environment. They want to felt cared for, they want to felt thought of. And so providing them opportunities where you're investing in building their competence. And then I was just talking about the relatedness. Relatedness is a sense of belonging. So you have to be very intentional about creating that. And you can do that virtually and in person. So some examples of activities that we've done. We have a weekly team meeting that's virtual. So we get together once a week. We have a very scheduled cadence that we follow every single time so people know what to expect, but it's just a time to come together. We start with an icebreaker, believe it or not, after for every week. And even though the team knows each other, different people are responsible for it, and they come up with some really fun and creative ideas. People talk about how they're living their values, and then we go through some project updates, some um, HR updates, and it's a really great way to come together and talk with each other. And then we have in-person all hands meetings as well. So we have everybody come on site somewhere where we get together and we're able to sit across from each other and break bread and do some team building together and do some volunteer work together. And that creates those experiences that we can share that helps to build the trust and keep the team connected when we're not together. Another thing that HBR mentions is investing in the tools, providing the tools that the team needs to be successful in a hybrid environment. So if people can't work, or it's frustrating, the technology isn't working, or they aren't able to connect, you're going to feel that, and they're going to feel that, and they're not going to show up the way that they need to for you. So remember that autonomy is good and uncertainty is kind of stressful. So it is on you to create these kind of guidelines, but not to mandate them, if you can understand the difference there between those. I mentioned earlier, creating intentional relationships to build trust, to be able to provide feedback to folks, to help guide career growth, to help the team become those brand ambassadors that we were talking about earlier, and really wanting to show up for your organization every single day and give it their best, being engaged rather than disengaged. It seems like a lot of work when you have your other job to do or other jobs to do, but I would argue, and I always will, that your people are your most valuable resource. Without them, you're not going to be able to do the job that you need to do. Your company won't be successful. And you could say, well, we can just find someone else to do the job. But think about the cultural fit, the people that really fit into your organization and make it a place, all those words that you described your culture, right? Where you feel supported and happy and joyful. You really want to hold on to those people and make them feel valued and an important part of your organization. So think about getting personal, knowing your employees, knowing your teams, knowing what inspires and motivates each person. And that takes time. That takes time. But I would argue that that's your most important job. So just take a minute to reflect. I'm not going to ask you now to participate. Just take a minute and think about, what are your cultural priorities? Navigating this hybrid world, what are non-negotiables? Like, what has to happen for your culture? And what can you do right away? What can you do this week to make that happen, or this month, or before the end of the year?
There's a question that came in the chat. It was just suggestions for hiring right and suggestions for firing right, if that wasn't
Mm,
addressed.
Gosh, those are great questions. So I encourage you to continue to reflect as I'm chatting, but so hiring right. So again, I'm going to go back to those values. We used that as part of our hiring process, right? We have integrity, care about the greater good, and get it done. And we built questions around those to ask each person as we were interviewing. So we could hear their stories, situational interviewing, where they could let us know where they've demonstrated those values before in the past. Referrals are always great. We found, I know we don't always have the great pleasure of having that, but if you have someone in your network that has worked with someone before that can vouch for them, we have found the most success in that. Firing right, it is so hard. I mean, that is just the worst, isn't it? Letting someone go. I have to tell you, in my career, um, usually it needs to happen well before you take action on it. And I would encourage you to take action sooner, because it's not only detrimental to your team and the culture that you've created if someone who is not working there starts to erode the culture a bit, and has people kind of questioning why that person gets to stay and do those things. But also, it does it does benefit the person you're letting go, honestly, in the long run, because you're likely keeping them from other opportunities that could be coming their way. Um, I found like the best way to do it is obviously through some coaching. So there's performance improvement plans, very clear feedback. Because the best is if you could coach them out of the behaviors that aren't fitting with the organization and help them to move into, maybe there's a new position that they could go into that would be a better alignment. But if it does come to letting them go, I'd say it's so hard, but the longer you wait to do it, the more painful it is for everybody involved. Good questions. Thank you for that. All right, hopefully you had some good time to reflect on some culture building activities. And so I'm not going to go to Slido here, but I would, if you could entertain me, because you guys did so great with Slido, if you could just in the chat, maybe throw in one culture building activity that maybe that's been on your mind, that you think would help support the hybrid environment that you might find yourself in. I gave you a couple ideas. I could give you a couple more as folks are typing in the chat. A lot of these we still maintain in our new partnership with 10 Pearls. So we have monthly celebrations. So it's a quick half hour where we jump on virtually and we celebrate folks' birthdays, their anniversaries with the organization, and then we open it up to anything else folks want to celebrate. So we've celebrated pet birthdays on those before, kids graduating from kindergarten all the way through college, somebody buying their new home, somebody fixing something in their home that they've been putting off for a long time, somebody training for a marathon, so that's fun to do every month, is just to kind of connect and come on. We do bi-weekly, so every other week we'll do coffee chats on Friday morning at 9 a.m. People come in and out. There's no requirement, but people join. It's again a virtual, because we have a very disparate team across the states here. So that's a really nice way to get folks together, is just to jump on for that bi-weekly coffee chat. That was something that started during COVID and just kind of hung on. And some weeks we've got 3 people and some weeks we've got 12 or more. We do sometimes do a virtual happy hour, and then we would send like a gift card where folks could buy dinner, or they could, buy beverages or whatever they wanted to do during that time. And we did it at 4. There's another thing to point out, having after hours things can be fun, but also it can be like an obligation. So we'd start it at 4 so people could drop at 5 if they wanted to, or stay on. So those are some other kind of fun ways that we would connect with each other. And then in person, I find that the volunteer work together, everyone always loves doing that when we're on site together. We've done so many fun in-person things. We've gone to arcades. We did like a escape room. We haven't done axe throwing yet, but I think that would be super fun. Bowling, comedy show, magician. We did a cruise on Lake Michigan. Lots of fun things to do in person. Do we have any ideas in the chat?
Yeah, someone mentioned that having those that are in the region meet up in person for an activity or a dinner. For example, they also do virtual lunches and happy hours. And in October, the company is meeting at headquarters in Texas.
Ah, see, I mean, that's such a great balance, right? You've got those virtual opportunities where it sounds like a lot of folks could get together and see each other, and then those in-person ones. I love the idea of the regional meetups. Sometimes those tend to be, easier to do, right? You have folks maybe that only need to drive an hour or 2 to get somewhere, but providing those opportunities, at least providing those opportunities and encouraging folks to attend, I think can really make all the difference, versus not really having anything available. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Any other thoughts? Anyone wants to share? Well, any final questions or thoughts for me? I welcome them. I know I appreciate your Slido participation. I'm so glad that went well. I know it's harder to come off mute or to go in the chat. But this is what we covered off together today. And I'm really grateful for your time and attention and thoughts. I do welcome any thoughts or questions that you have now. If you're not comfortable speaking up in front of the entire group, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Megan Newhouse, Meighan. I know I didn't come up with that, but it's kind of fun. I welcome the connection and feel free to send me a message via LinkedIn if you'd like to connect offline here. Um, I'll leave it for a minute, but otherwise, I am so grateful again to Matter. Thank you so much for allowing me to share my passion on the Lunch and Learn today. And for those of you who were able to join and be a part of it, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Reiterating, Megan, thank you for coming. Megan, thank you for being here today. I know this is kind of a still 10 pearls, not really a part 2 from last month, but always good to hear from other folks. So thank you again. We'll have the recording posted on our website in a couple of days, and it'll be shared out with the survey as well. So again, we appreciate any and all feedback and hope you have a lovely rest of your day.